Adam Hutchison. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Mr. Nash?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. For the last 2 years, August has been a clear month. And basically every year prior to that, it's smoky. There's all this tremendous fear of wildfire. And while there's still that capability and potential right now, it's pretty nice.
Man, we just lit one up on the divide over by Lemhi Pass yesterday. So our beautiful blue skies were changed in the matter of hours, and from Twin Bridges you could just see the plume
Oh,
making its way over. So it's not as bad. It's definitely hazy. It could be worse over this way. But man, fire season is just so. I mean, you just never know what you're gonna get. So
yeah. Well, we're actually overcast here today, and I'm going to go guide a fly fishing trip this evening. And, looking at it a week out, I was like, man, I don't know. It's pretty hot, pretty dry, and definitely not the kind of conditions that I like to fish in. But, a cooler than normal overcast day with some afternoon breeze in August, we're going
oh,
to catch some fish on some hoppers, son.
hoppers, streamers, whatever you want, really. I mean, it's all on the menu right now. I think August is one of those underrated months for anglers. People tend to focus on May, June, and July. I mean, you have the a huge range of hatches and stuff going on, but man, August is such a sleeper month. I love it because, especially in Montana, tourism kind of goes away. The wild card is always water quality, but God, the last few years, the water's been excellent. It hasn't been too mossy. I mean, hoot owl's still in effect, but man, everything's on the menu. And then hoppers, I mean, the best hatch of all time, right? So,
Yeah.
are you just guiding on the ranch there?
Yep, exactly. So streamers aren't really much of a thing here. I mean, we can do it a little bit. It's one of those like there's a couple pools where at last light you can go and drag a yuck bug through there and maybe turn up a bigger fish. But generally, streamers are a little bit tricky, especially since we're bank fishing. For me, the best way to fish streamers is floating down the middle of the river and then casting at the banks. But yeah. So, having had so much of that experience on the Big Hole and some of those great rivers around you in Montana, coming back and trying to drag streamers from the middle of the river towards the bank is like, this isn't the way it's supposed to go. So I almost have like a philosophical opposition to it.
It's a swinging game, I think, over on that side of the divide. You're exactly right. It seems to change. One of Winston's top pros, Brian Sylvie, he's like, man, it drives me crazy because on the Deschutes, they don't really eat streamers either. They'll eat a swung fly or a swung sculpin or something like that, but it's not really a streamer game. And I mean, that's interesting, right? So, I mean, over here on the east side of the divide, I mean, you get a cool day like you guys have over there, and man, it even in August, it could be just lights out. I mean, we were on the river last Friday, and we had a crazy streamer day. And people don't think of August as streamers for streamers, but I mean, if the conditions are right, the fish are kind of cued in, warmer water temps, it could be lights out. But it's funny how that changes, from region to region. So
Yeah. And, if you get into some of our bull trout rivers, like streamers are definitely the ticket there, right? I mean, they would eat a tube sock if you stripped it in front of them. But these rainbows, they just don't really do it that much over here. Now, there's definitely times where a sculpzilla is definitely the way to go, but it's still more or less a swung pattern, a swung presentation, even if you are articulating it a little bit, animating that presentation. But my buddy Paul just caught a absolute lunker of a rainbow off the Grand Ronde, and it's bass temperatures down there right now. I wouldn't even have expected this fish to be that low in the system, and he did it on a sculpzilla, and there's sort of a trough in the middle of the stream below a riffle that is just a place that holds a little bit cooler water that you can expect to find a fish. And he went out there and yeah, caught a nice fish on a streamer. So it can be done.
It can be, but yeah. Anyways, hoppers, right? I mean, that's just so tough to beat, especially for anglers just starting out. I don't know if there's a better eat out there on a fly. Anyways, it's super tough to beat that style of fishing. Since I've lived in Montana, I've gotten into crane fly fishing, the last 15 years.
Oh, really?
That's another hatch you don't really hear about over here. And I enjoy it almost as much as I enjoy hopper fishing. It's just incredible. I don't know if you guys get many crane flies over there. I'm sure plenty of larvae, but over here we're skittering those things down and across. And I have watched fish just lose their damn minds, like travel great distances just to jump on the crane. I not necessarily, but just a belly flop on it and be like, "Not today, sir." And man, I don't know if there's any more fun you can have. And it's just, crane fly fish are just a different caliber of fish. It's just like, no, sir, I eat crane flies, and that's it, And it's like these 12-inch fish eating crane flies that are 12 inches, but they're like 10 inches deep. It's like, yeah, you eat crane flies. So that's been
Nice.
that's been my jam as far as fishing in August the last 10 years. It's something that I enjoy, and it goes against all the principles of standard fly fishing. Mend, dead drift. It's just like you're skating it across a surface like you used to when you're like 10 years old, trying to get little brookies to eat. But these things are just giant browns coming after these things. So it's pretty sweet. But that's kind of been my thing.
It does not surprise me that you found an obscure, specialized niche of fly fishing to make your own, and that sounds like it's right up your alley.
Oh, I don't know if you've ever done it, but you might just test it on the ranch, whether that's tonight or tomorrow or when you have some free time, and just skitter a crane fly down and across, trail it with a big soft tackle, and just see what happens. I mean, it's not technically, it's like dry fly fishing mixed with streamer fishing mixed with swinging. It's like all good things into one. It's like eating your birthday cake, like all of your birthday cake at once.
Well, the crane fly fishing is a really big deal on some of these central Oregon lakes around the Bend area, which, I've not gone down there to fish. It's hard for me to leave fish to find fish. But if you ever find yourself down there, I think that you might really dig that. It's a different presentation, obviously, on still water, but you could figure it out.
Yeah, absolutely. It definitely is a different presentation, but yeah, those things are just nuts too. I mean, I think that hatch. There's so much unknown about that fly, and I think for people that don't know what a crane fly is, a lot of people call them daddy long legs. If you're over in Great Britain, they call them daddy long legs. Growing up in Nevada, we called them mosquito eaters. They look like a giant mosquito, and they get caught up in the cobwebs of like your windowsill all the time. And they're just like a giant mosquito. But I think, especially in the Beaver Head, where I live in Southwest Montana, a lot of the fish eat the larva. Then all that larva is just on logs and rocks underneath undercuts. And you'll see fish. I mean, if you're really watching, you'll see fish jump up or not jump up, but knock the larva off the logs. And I mean, crane fly larva, underneath an indicator or something is pretty deadly in a lot of our tailwaters up here. And just like, it's like a glorified maggot in a way, the larva stage of it. But I mean, those fish, I mean, it's just pure protein. And a lot of those fish, especially on the Beaver Head, are just eating that larva. But when they're on the adults, and they'll eat the larva, all year long. But when they're finally on the adults, and it seems for us to be in August and September, it's just an exciting way to fish. And man, if you haven't done it, Nash, we gotta get you back to Montana, man, and just do it. It's just kid stuff, You just giggle the whole time. You miss like 80% of the fish, but you just can't wait for the next time something chases it down. So
That sounds good. That sounds like it's right up my alley. Well, let's introduce you, Adam, so that people know who they're listening to.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm Adam Hutchison. I live in Southwest Montana. I work for a fly fishing company called RL Winston Rod Company. I've been with Winston for about 10 years. I've done several different jobs. I started off in production and worked my way up through customer service, became a sales associate, worked social media marketing, and now I'm the national director or national sales and marketing manager for the brand for both Winston, and then do a lot of advisement for Bauer Reels as well. But it's been a wild ride, and a very historic brand. So but I mean, I fish a lot, but just kind of an all around outdoorsman as well.
And archery hunting is still a big part of your life. You're a traditional bow shooter.
Yeah, shoot several different traditional bows right now. I've shot a Jerry Hill longbow for years. Jerry is the long lost nephew of Howard Hill, so he's based his longbow designs off of Howard's, which is pretty unique. So he makes a unique bow, and I don't think he's making bows anymore, but it's a good shooting bow. It's something I've shot for almost 20 years, and it just kind of I just recently bought a Black Widow recurve too, and that's if widows are super smooth and really easy to shoot, very little stack. But yeah, I've been a traditional bow hunter basically my whole life. Hunt plenty with rifle. That's the beauty of living in Montana. If I don't make it happen with the struggle stick, I certainly get that second season to go in with the boomstick and take care of business. But it's funny, like my wife always says, there's a divide, and she's like, it happens about August 20th, or maybe August 15th or August 1st, or right around August. She's like, you kind of transition from fishing to bow hunting. It's like that natural progression of focus. And if I get an early season buck tag, that focus happens a little bit sooner. But I've been lucky enough the last couple of years to go down south and hunt muleys, but we're definitely full blown getting ready for elk hunting coming up here in September. So that's super exciting as well. So,
And one of the funnest hunts I've ever been on in my life was a traditional archery bow hunt for mule deer in central Nevada with you.
yeah, I mean, so much has changed since that trip, right? I mean, you were accepted into Marines officer school. I was a I hadn't met my now wife yet, so we were just a couple of young bucks, relatively free to go off and do things, and just haven't really experienced life. But man, that was such an epic trip.
Oh, it was awesome.
I mean, there were so many bucks that year. We had to kind of pick our stocks, especially with traditional tackle. And I remember one was three quarters of the way down the mountain, and it was a nice buck. And I was just like, I don't know. And you're just like, if you don't go down there and kill that buck, I'm going to break your longbow right now. And so I manned up and went down there and got close and rolled a rock, and the buck proceeded to go over like 10 ridges, and I had to walk back up. But
Do you remember the chipmunk?
yeah, the chipmunk that buck stopped, or he kind of looked up, he switched beds, looked up, and then I just got into the shadow of the rim above him, and that chipmunk ran down my shoulder and stopped on my boot, and that buck was just looking at me like, well, that's definitely not a predator, because there's a chipmunk on that weird looking rock. So,
Oh,
man.
so hilarious. So I'm way up on this ridge, 1,400 yards away, watching Adam and this deer in a spotting scope. And when you're watching somebody sneak up on a deer from long ways away, when they're 50 yards away, it looks like they are right there. Like, so for the longest time, I'm like, just shoot him, like, are you going to grab him? Like, what's happening? And then you get closer and closer and closer. And, all this very, very precision stalking is going on. And then the sun just got around to the point where this buck had to get up and change positions. And instead of looking downhill, now he's looking uphill. And you were in a good spot to sit there and wait. So you just froze, and then this chipmunk decided to run all over you.
Yeah, man, that's traditional bow hunting 101, right? I mean, God, you're successful very little. I mean, there's some guys that do it very well, and certainly better than me, but you have experiences with longbows and recurves that otherwise you probably may not have, whereas 50 yards is usually good enough. For me, it's certainly not. And have to get much closer. And then you experience things like chipmunks and all kinds of other things. And it's certainly a fun way to hunt. And if you're patient and at it long enough, you certainly find success. But man, that was such a fun hunt. I mean, we saw a buck up there that I'd seen like 4 years in a row before you came up and hunted, and that was a special buck as well. And we saw a super. Remember the old buck that we saw? Uh,
Yeah.
we saw that super old buck that was regressing, and uh,
Yeah. We saw a three-legged coyote at over 10,000 feet elevation.
yeah, I mean that was we saw that herd of like 12 bucks, and there was like one buck that was kind of delegated to direct sunlight. He just never was good enough for the deep shade. But man, that was such a memorable hunt. That was so much fun. And
I stopped I stopped on the way down, and I can't remember. It might have been an Elko or something like that, and I got sushi for some stupid reason. Remember, in the first place that we went to go hunt, we were sneaking up on deer, like trying to slip in to these rims, and I was like, "Burp!" Like, started getting bubbly. I was like, "Adam, don't turn around. Just keep going. I'm sorry for what's about to happen."
that's a pro tip for everybody out there: don't get sushi in Elko, Nevada. Right?
Yeah, definitely not, because every 15 minutes I was having to just spray down some freaking sagebrush. And
And like that country is there's nothing out there. I mean, it's just like rimrock and scrub sage, and that's it. So you're just in the sun, dealing with
yeah,
it. So
oh, it was so terrible. So we get good and dehydrated and then move on to the next mountain range. And then that is the point where, you'd had to pack water in there previously because, there's no water up on top for humans to consume. I don't know what the deer were doing. And yeah, so we're living up there at high elevation with all these insanely big deer. And it was a struggle. We really had a budget with water, we had a budget with food, and one of the coolest stalks of that entire thing. And again, like, this sounds like nothing but bloopers, and it kind of was. But there's this great big deer that started to come up through this pass, and we'd seen him go through this pass a couple times over a couple days, kind of morning and evening. He was traveling through it, and there was this big, sort of low pinyon juniper thing right on top, and you hauled butt down this ridge and got behind this juniper. And I'm sitting up on top watching the show again, and this great big buck, old deer, he comes up and he comes straight up to the other side of the juniper. So now you're only one tree apart, and like, you're both staring at each other through this tree, but neither of you can see each other. And this show for me is just incredible to watch. I can't handle the suspense. And then simultaneously, Adam turns to the right and the deer turns to the right, and they just walk around the tree, completely mirroring each other, both of you being so stealthy and quiet. And then as soon as you'd done 180 degrees around that tree, that deer smelled where you'd just been and bailed off. And I was like, oh my gosh, so amazing.
it is a blooper reel, man, for sure. But God, that was such a great trip. And I think my brother came up after you did, and we went back up there and had a good time. No success that trip, but yeah, that's one of the, I mean, I can't believe that was over 10 years ago already. It's amazing how fast time flies.
Yes, it does. Well, let's shift gears back to fly fishing a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
This year, there's been more interest in fly fishing than I've seen in a long time, and I think there's a lot going on, but people's plans got changed, so they had to shift to improvisation a little bit. And a lot of folks turn to fishing. Fishing license sales are way up in Oregon. They're way up in Montana, and I'm sure they are in other states as well. And as people get into this, they're trying to figure out, what kind of gear they need. And, it can be really intimidating. And what I recommend to people is to get the best stuff that they can afford so that as their skill grows, that they don't grow out of their gear. What should people look for in a fly rod? Like what features of a fly rod, what construction? I mean, there's like IM8 and all this stuff. It doesn't mean anything to somebody who isn't sort of bred into it. So can you kind of talk through the construction of a fly rod and what features are good or bad or help you in different situations?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many great rods out there. That's the first thing I'm going to say to anybody. And I'm dyed in the wool Winston Green up here in Twin Bridges, but I'm going to start off by saying that there's an awful lot of great fly rods out there and fly reels that you don't have to break a budget to get into it and enjoy it. But you're exactly right. I think it comes down to, and that's, as the sales manager here at Winston, that's something I'm trying to decipher, and I don't know how to answer it for Winston. We have, like you said, Nash, there's a ton of new anglers. I mean, it's a huge upswing, right? And shops are reporting record number of people coming in and buying gear, and price point and kit rods and reels are certainly sold out just about anywhere. Like, we can't, every 9 foot 5 weight that we're making at Winston is essentially sold, as it's coming through. So we're building it, inspecting it, putting it in a box and shipping it out. But there's a lot of great rods. And I suppose the first question a new angler or a beginning angler needs to ask themselves is, where do you fish? And how do you like to fish, after going through this year? What did you really enjoy about it? Because there's a lot of niche rods out there. If you just like, if you like kind of a do-all type of trout rod, it's tough to beat a 9 foot 5 weight or a 9 foot 6 weight. Probably faster action. A faster action is going to allow you to move from, and when I say fast action, I'm not talking about a stiff rod that feels like you're casting a 2x4. I'm talking about a rod, graphite, that recovers fairly quickly. You still want rods to load. So the better a rod loads, the more feedback it gives to you. And that's what fly fishing is all about: is understanding the feedback the rod gives to you, and understanding what that means. Everybody has different casting strokes and needs. So understanding those needs. So if you're buying an all around trout rod, probably a 5 or a 6 weight, generally in 9 feet. Our old rod designer jokes that the only reason 9 foot rods exist is because fly fishing guides needed them. For tougher clients. So I mean, an 8.5
Oh,
and
interesting.
a 9 foot rod is really a good versatile rod. Now, if you're fishing smaller water, if you have smaller water, and that's going to be your primary source, a shorter rod, like an 8.5 rod, might be good. So just kind of evaluating how you're going to be fishing most of the time. Do you have a local river or creek or bass pond? And understanding those needs. So buying a rod based on those needs. So if you're in Montana or in Oregon, you're fishing bigger water, 9 foot rod is a good choice, because it's going to give you the options to lift line off the water for better mending. The 9 foot rod is a nice size lever. Usually, the longer the lever or the length of the rod, the further you can cast. Some things that longer rods don't necessarily do great are accuracy up close. There's not as much feel and feedback. I kind of compare it to choking up on a baseball bat. The more you choke up on a bat, the faster you're going to swing it. And same with a shorter rod. An 8.5 rod is going to have a lighter swing weight, and up close it's going to be more accurate. So if you're fishing smaller water, 8.5 is a good choice. Nine's still pretty good if you're traveling out to Montana. Maybe you fish your home waters, which are generally smaller, or you come to Montana or Oregon or Washington and you fish bigger water. An 8.5 or a 9 is going to be good. But I think just evaluating your needs, how you're going to be fishing most of the time. That's what I tell our customers. It's the first thing I ask them. I'm like, how are you going to be fishing most of the time? Let's get the 80% of the time out of the way and make sure you're covered for most of it. And fly rod, as you get into it, you kind of get that rod to take care of it all. And as you get into it, you can buy smaller rods, 6.5, 7 foot 3 weights for little brookie creeks. You can buy 9.5 foot rods as specialized nymphing tools. You can buy super fast, aggressive rods for streamers. So you just kind of add to your quiver as you get into it. But I think for people getting into it, a good solid five weight or 6 weight that has a moderate to fast action is a good investment. And just to gauge, if that's something that you're going to continue on with in the future. So.
And when you say investment like this, a fly rod can last for a very long time, but more than likely at some point it meets catastrophe, whether that's in the form of, you stepping on it or, slamming it in a car door or whatever. So it can be a lot of money if it's just something that's going to break, right?
No, I mean, totally. And I mean, that you see in the fly fishing industry, just about every rod manufacturer offers a lifetime warranty on their rod. Now, what that means, a lot of people confuse lifetime warranty for free rod repair. And that's definitely not the case. There's essentially a deductible is the way I would call it. Whether you step on it, you smash it in the window, you snag it in the willows, whatever. For us, it's a $75 administrative fee, and that covers our labor cost to actually build a new section. So at Winston, we completely build a brand new section. We don't repair the section. We don't use super glue here at Winston. We'll just build a brand new section, custom fit it on the original rod, and then make sure it fits. It fits, it casts good, and then you're on the way. So that $75 goes towards the person that answers the repair phone call, the person that puts in labor, and then also shipping charges back to you. So that's what that entails. And I think depending on the rod company, it usually varies from $50 to maybe $100, depending on the rod company. If you buy a Winston secondhand, for us, say you buy a rod off of eBay from a guy selling his old Winston, say you break it, as long as we're still able to repair it, we'll still repair it. It won't be covered under warranty, but standard repair fees will come in, and it's generally the repair fees are generally about the same cost as buying a new low end type of fly rod. So we're pretty versatile. There's some rods that Winston and maybe other brands can't fix, but that's the investment. The more you invest up front with a premium brand, obviously the more performance and specified performance you get out of a fly rod, but also kind of that brand standing behind that product and being able to take care of you with great customer service and attention to detail as that rod gets repaired. So that's part of the investment of getting a premium type of fly rod out of the gate. So,
and I really appreciate that explanation and that honesty. I think a lot of people get a little bit entitled about how they approach warranties, and I wish that folks would sort of flip the table around on themselves and think, okay, if this was my business, what would be the fairest way for me to go about making sure that this customer was honestly and appropriately serviced and satisfied? And the reality is, if you buy a rod as a kid and you break that thing half a dozen times in your life, which is really reasonable, that company still needs to make money off that, and they need to stay whole, but they need to keep you satisfied as a customer as well. So paying a service fee or a repair fee is just an honest way to go about doing it, and that's something that should be a fair expectation from a customer.
I think so. I mean, it's interesting. I don't know much about the optics business, but you see brands like just about everybody now in the optics lineup that it seems like they'll just replace it regardless if you're the original owner or not. And I'm just scratching my head wondering how these guys are getting by and you know, what their MOQs and margins are on these things. It must be fantastic. But I mean, we're talking about graphite, right? That's really, when you roll it on a mandrel, it's paper thin. So when that graphite resin system cures, you're talking about especially in the tip section, you're talking about a very thin layer of graphite that, I mean, you look at graphite wrong. Sometimes it seems like it may break, but I mean, it's just kind of like you said, it's the nature of fly rods. I mean, when you're talking thin graphite material, um, things happen. I mean, if you haven't broken a fly rod in your life, I mean, have you really fly fished? That's my question,
Yeah, no, no, you have not. And you've certainly never fly fished with Doug, for example.
Man, I mean, that guy, he's the ultimate client. I'll tell you that.
We're talking about Adam's little brother here.
God, I love him though. He is the life of the party. But man, it's funny. Like I enjoy fishing with Doug. More than just about anybody, and we have just a great time. But he's maybe 3.5 years younger than me. But I mean, we're both in our 30s, so we're. My philosophy is if you're in your 30s, whether you're 31 or 39, you're the same age, but when we go fly fishing together, I'm definitely the older brother, and it's one time nowadays that I can tell him what to do and when to do it, and he abides by that law. So, I just got to get him rowing on the sticks a little bit so I can enjoy myself a little bit. But you're exactly right. Yeah, Doug tends to be the life and the comedy relief in the drift boat these days for sure. So,
well, we had a pretty tight knit group of friends going through college, and we all spent a lot of time hunting and fishing together. A lot of time, so much time, in fact, that I'm pretty sure that all of us spent an entire extra year in college because of the amount of fly fishing that we had done in the previous 4 years.
That's right. Yeah. It was typical college years, right? We'd be out all night long, but up at 4 a.m. to go fish Clark Canyon, at first light, and man, those were the days for sure.
Absolutely. So, we talked about crane flies as sort of an emerging type of technique or a hatch that people haven't been thinking about, and a presentation style and fly selection that isn't really well thought about or well known. And I think maybe the absolute classic thing that people think of when they're talking about fly fishing is a rainbow trout coming up to the surface, eating a dry fly. You're on some kind of a freestone river, mountain in the background. Like that's the image that a lot of people have. What are some emerging fisheries around the world that are starting to get attention?
Oh man. I think it's funny. I think saltwater is really growing. Saltwater fishing. Obviously, there's been people fly fishing in the salt for a lot of years. But saltwater fishing is something that, you know, not even hardcore anglers do. I mean, a lot of people will put a salt trip down to Belize or Mexico or wherever it is that they're going. One for trout, one thing that's really starting to stand up is Iceland, and that's on my bucket list. those browns up there are just, they're beautiful. They're huge. I don't know if there's anywhere more beautiful than Iceland. That's on my short list. But I mean, Iceland's kind of emerging as a destination. South America for a lot of different things. Jungle fishing, certainly. In the past 6 or 7 years, whether it's for peacock bass or golden dorado or arapaima, vampire fish, whatever it may be. I mean, the jungle is, maybe that's the new emerging type of destination where it's really an adventure. You get a lot of the indigenous stuff down there that makes it really unique. The fish eat a fly like crazy down there. You're fishing for golden dorado in these gin clear little tropical streams, and they eat it like a trout streamer, but they're just 5 times as big as a brown trout, and they're that's a cool setting, and it's a place where you're fishing in the tracks of jaguars. You could get stung by a stingray, so you have to wear stingray shin guards and gators and that sort of thing. So really fishing in the jungle for those exotic type of species is really starting to emerge. And you see a lot more lodges and motherships pop up here and there. One of my favorite operations that I'm hopefully going to go to once all this clears up is Nomadic Waters out of Brazil. And Michael Williams is kind of the main operator out of there. He's a Winston Pro, and kind of a shout out to Michael. He does a lot of really unique stuff, and they fish out of skiffs, but I mean, they fish a lot of flooded timber, and it's just stripping big streamers for these huge peas. And I mean, he runs a really unique operation. He's got a beautiful mothership with all the accommodations and bells and whistles, and you really couldn't beat or meet a nicer guy to run it either. So he does a lot of stuff for the local people in Brazil. Hires local guys for guides and stuff, and donates a certain percentage of his profits go back into the local villages and communities back there. So he runs a great operation. But man, certainly the guys at Untamed Angling have really done an amazing job. They have several different locations. So jungle fishing is really kind of that attractive new thing for anglers to do, especially in the past 8 years. It seems that's really starting to blow up. So,
and part of what you're cheesing at here that I'm seeing in really all aspects of the outdoors is that there's an increasing amount of focus on the things outside of the main event. Like if you want to go fish for arapaima, there's so much adventure just in getting to a place where you can catch an arapaima that the actual fishing may end up being a footnote to the adventure overall.
exactly. I mean, and even with trout stuff, you look at trout fishing, and 10 years ago when we were in college, like you could probably stay with one rod series from a manufacturer, and you could get a 3 weight, you could get a 5 weight and a 7 weight, and be covered for just about. And this is in the same rod family, right? But now brands are making like specific rods for jungle fishing. You see specific trout spay rods for trout fishing now. And I mean that's taken over the past 10 years. So you see a lot more specialty in fly fishing these days. It's not just, oh, I'm going to buy a 6 weight for all my trout fishing. I'm going to buy an 8 weight for steelhead, and then I'll have, people are really starting to buy specific tools for very specific applications, whether that's trout fishing or, going down to Brazil or Argentina or wherever it may be. So there's a lot more specialty these days.
Let's talk about the people's fish.
Okay.
And I'd say that there's two fish that are the people's fish. One of them is near and dear to me. The other one is near and dear to practically everyone else in the world. But the first one is the mountain whitefish, my lady.
Yes.
Are people starting to show her a little bit more respect in Montana or no?
Oh, yeah, for sure. And, we've talked about this quite a bit. The more whitefish you see in a river system, the healthier the river. And, I think locals, especially in Montana, really regard the whitefish, and honestly, they can take a slow August day that would otherwise be a slow August day and, make it a great day. And, whitefish are fantastic on the fly rod. They fight very well. They don't seem to tire out as quickly as a lot of trout do when the water temps get a little bit warmer. Um, but yeah, I mean, they're definitely more regarded. I think when people come up and buy a guided trip, that they all dream of the 2 foot brown trout, or the rainbow that cartwheels 8 times when they set the hook. I think that's the dream, but the reality is whitefish is, and the thing about whitefish is it's a native fish. It's been here long before Lewis and Clark came through our area. So I mean, it should be. You see a lot more. You see stickers. You see whitefish lives matter stickers from different outfitters, and kind of playing off that, hey, whitefish are important. They're a fun fish, and when you get whitefish eating flies on top, they're definitely a challenge. They have a smaller mouth, and when they're focused on tricos or something like that on the edge of foam, certainly fun and a challenging fish on top as well. So yeah, you see that their popularity growing, more so than it was maybe 10 or 15 years ago for sure. So
And here in Oregon, and I would say many places west slope, whitefish are the only native game fish that we have that's never been through a hatchery program. So they're the only real native fish that we have left. Everything else has been genetically tampered.
that's right. They're in it for the long haul, man. I mean, they have that ability to survive different types of environmental conditions, whether it's a high water year or a drought year. I mean, they really have that adaptability that really speaks toward them as a game fish in all reality. And if the beautiful thing about whitefish too is that they smoke up really well. So I mean, that's kind of a benefit too, that they're delicious table fare if people want to take a few home. So
Yep, they're tremendous table fare. They are a salmonid, so people often say, "Well, they're very bony." Like, yeah, they are, but they have the same exact bone structure as a trout, salmon, or steelhead. So they're not a sucker. Their mouth is not on the bottom. It's a forward-facing mouth. And when people hook up, you know, oftentimes it's the biggest fish that they catch of the day, and they fight hard. They're very willing to take a fly, and people are having just a gas of a time. And then you get that fish in the net and they go, "Oh, it's a whitefish." It's like, well, what changed?
yeah,
Nothing changed. This is a native fish that just about whooped you on your 9'5" weight. And, you're going to like poo poo it because its mouth is shaped funny. Like, come on, get real.
yeah, for sure. And I mean, you look at their gill plates too, and they get that really cool rosy color when they start to spawn. And I think they have a beauty all their own in a lot of regards. It's like a grayling and uh, rainbow kind of just had sex and out came. I mean, that's kind of what it is. Or maybe a grayling and a bonefish. Really, they have a lot of similarities to saltwater bonefish. Than
Totally.
than anything. And
Yeah.
I think that they're super cool and underappreciated. But you do see a lot of. There's definitely been a growing appreciation for that species. As conservation movements have grown over the past decade. So
Well, I'm glad to hear that, because there's definitely both guides and clients that treated those fish poorly, a decade ago, and I'm glad that people are coming around a little bit. So the
yeah.
other fish that I call the soccer of fish is the common carp. So the common carp is the most fished for fish in the world and the most eaten fish in the world. And it has long held very low regard in the United States, a lot like soccer. But unlike soccer, or unlike soccer players, carp are not wimps. Carp are a absolutely tough animal, and they're available all over the place. Is carp fishing continuing to increase in popularity? It had a surge for a while.
It absolutely is. In fact, I know guys and people in California that would tell you where to go catch a 2 foot brown trout before they would give up their carp spot. So I mean, there's definitely, I think carp are an extremely difficult species to catch, especially on the fly. They're very picky. They're very meticulous about what they're eating and how they're eating. And when they finally eat, they behave more like a saltwater fish than they do a freshwater fish. They don't have, it seems like the warmer the water, the better they are when it comes to, fighting them on a rod. But you sight fish them differently. It's a very different game. And I mean, talk about the ways to catch them, whether you're using conventional tackle or fly tackle, or you're a bowfish angler, whatever it may be. I mean, carp provides so much opportunity to sportsmen, and that in alone is just fantastic. A buddy of mine and I were talking last week about a carp on the beaverhead that he caught, and I guess they nymphed it up like you do any trout on any kind of blue ribbon in Montana. And he thought it was going to be the biggest brown trout that he's ever caught of his life. And they get it close to the boat and notices that it's a carp. And he told me, he's like, I was way more excited that it was a carp than it was a big brown, because they're just as tough, if not tougher to catch. They're fantastic game. They're just a great fish. They're amazing. And it's just provides a different challenge, and a skill set than standard trout fishing in the West. And man, they're really, you can catch them just about any way you want to catch them.
So I would tell people, if you're fishing in a tailwater someplace and your greatest hope is that you're going to turn up an 18-inch rainbow or brown trout, and you're throwing a number 47 trico on 11x tippet or whatever, that's cool. That's cool if that's the thing that you're into. But if you drive around that dam and you go to the top end of that reservoir and pull out your 8-weight and some kind of little brown poofy carp pattern and get out there in that mud flat and start hunting for carp, you could hook into a 20 or 30 pound carp that is higher in pounds than you were previously hoping for in inches. And if you hook up to that fish, he might break you.
Yeah. Oh, totally. Like, forget about your 11x tippet. You need to, that's like straight mono. It's like, but I mean, that's the thing with them, is that they're smart. So it's not like you can just use heavy mono. I mean, they're leader shy. So you have to have perfect presentation when you're catching them on a fly. So I mean, they're a unique species. And you see more and more people buying saltwater style skiffs for these reservoirs, and they're just bypassing the trout water and going to these types of reservoirs and sight fishing carp. And it's a great way to get away from people, because there's very few. You'll see a lot fewer anglers. You're, like you said, you're catching bigger fish. It's a challenge. It's a hoot. You get to see your backing. Actually, that's pretty cool. Just about every carp, will show you your backing, and man, it's just like, wow, I forgot that there was backing on there, and that's always a plus. But man, it's so much fun. It's so much fun, and I think people. I mean, you see a lot of people in my home state of Nevada take it very seriously. Like, they're super secretive of it. And I'll be like, "You got that at location X, right?" And they're like, "I'm not telling you." So
there's a
I mean, it
there's
was
a
the best
dude.
poker face ever. So you can't get anything out of them. But
Yeah,
yeah, what a species, man, and still growing in popularity. I mean, there's waters here in Montana where they'll happily eat like a chubby Chernobyl off the top for a hopper or something like that. And, I mean, it's just not like fishing crayfish or weird patterns on the bottom. There's certainly dry fly opportunities for those big fish as well. So
that's awesome. There's a dude in downtown Phoenix, and I think his handle is Low Water Guide on Instagram. And I haven't fished with him, but I follow him. But he is guiding trips in downtown Phoenix for carp in these canals and stuff that go through town. Like that
perfect.
sounds awesome to me. Of course, that place is, the same temperature as the surface of the sun for most of the year. But, if you're down there on a business trip or you're one of the 25 million people that live there, like, why not get out and fish in the middle of town and try and catch one of these, big golden giants? It sounds fun to me.
Totally, man. You see it in a lot of urban spots. It's super popular, right? So, I mean, Phoenix is good. I mean, the LA River in Los Angeles, that's another spot where, dedicated fly anglers, that can't get to the Eastern Sierras every weekend. I mean, it's something that's right out their back door, that they can. It provides opportunity. I have a friend in Colorado, in Denver. Same thing. The Platte goes through Denver, and his name is Rick Mikesell. He works for Trout's Fly Fishing, and Rick is all about carp fishing, and it's just so entertaining to see his feed and how he's fishing them. I mean, he's got, it cracks me up. He's got the European setups, too, where it has like the bells and everything. So he's just not fly fishing for him, but he's got that European type of uh, beepers and stuff. So when a carp eats, it starts going off, and man, it's just an interesting way to catch fish. I mean, again, like you can catch them any way you really want, and you really ask for more than that?
I watched a video of a guy who had hooked up a big bag of popcorn to a leaf blower. Like this is so far departed from sort of the highbrow dry fly only all natural materials trout fly fishing. So he'd hooked up like this big bag of popcorn to a leaf blower and was just going and like spreading popcorn all over the surface of this lake. And he created a feeding frenzy of these gigantic carp, and then he put on his popcorn pattern and just had himself a ball.
Man, you could tie popcorn patterns pretty easily too.
I think so. I think I could. I think that's a fly that I could accomplish fairly successfully.
What I would do is I would just buy like a size 8 dry fly hook, or size 6 dry fly hook, and just thread a piece of popcorn on there, and just
There you go.
put on some like super glue and popcorn fly.
Yeah.
Man.
No, that's the kind of fishing that I can get behind. I mean, I can get behind any kind of fishing, let's be honest, but that sounds like a good time to me. Anything else come to mind? Any other cool opportunities in the world that people aren't really thinking of quite yet?
I briefly mentioned microspay fishing for trout. That's just a super fun way to approach trout fishing. If you kind of get tired or bored of your typical 9'5" weight, and whether you're using indicators or dry dropper or however you're catching it, provides an opportunity to catch trout or even smallmouth in a unique way where you're actually swinging a fly for trout. And I enjoy it because it passes the time between steelhead trips for me. And it's just a different eat. It's like we talked about crane flies before. A swung trout, whether it's a 10-incher or a 20-incher, it's such a different eat. They just sting it so hard, and it's just a fun way and a new way to approach the river. I mean, whether you're swinging soft tackles or trout spay style flies, it's a really fun way to approach trout fishing, and then it kind of keeps you on par with your salmon and steelhead spay fishing skills, and so that's something else to consider. And then you have the whole high sticking Euro nymphing, French nymphing type of revolution that's been going on for maybe the past 10 years. And if guys have kind of gotten tired of indicators and gone to this tight line style of nymphing, and just some guys are super tactical, and they're just deadly with those setups, And I don't know if there's a more um, I don't know if there's a more effective way to catch trout than someone who's skilled in that style of fishing. So that's really come on as well. But gosh, there's so many different ways to catch trout. It's amazing. But I would say, and that's one of my favorite ways to catch trout these days is just take the microspay out. You're not there for numbers, but the casting, the way the fish eat the fly is certainly just a great way to fish and approach the river. So
Yeah, and another thing that I really appreciate about this spay presentation, whether it's for steelhead or salmon or trout or whatever, um, if somebody's got bad shoulders, if you've got some arm injuries anywhere, this is going to take so much stress off of your body over, a day or even an hour of fishing. You can extend the type of fishing you do so much later in life if you start to learn these spay techniques and pick this stuff up.
oh, totally. I mean, absolutely. And then it not only that, but it helps you approach water that you may not have been able to touch before. It allows you to cast an awful long ways. So, I mean, if let's say you can access the river at a certain point, but you can't get to the other side, but there's a juicy looking run or riffle on that other side, spay fishing opens that water up, in a lot of different ways. I mean, you see guys using spay rods on bigger stillwater places. It's weird if you go to Pyramid Lake in Nevada and not see someone using a switch or a small spay rod, dangling balance leeches and chronomids underneath an indicator out there. I mean, that's kind of the standard now out there, just because it allows you to cast so much line out there and hit those drop off points without, putting a ladder out there or working your tail off, double hauling to get to the ledge. So, I mean, they really open up water in a different way that hasn't been available before.
Yeah, very cool. Okay, shifting gears again. I'm about to take off in a little over a month for my very first mountain goat hunt. And you had quite a mountain goat hunt yourself. So what advice do you have for me going into a goat hunt?
It's really simple. Just enjoy it. Just enjoy it, because they're. I mean, I don't know how I feel about spirit animals, but if I had a spirit animal, it'd be a mountain goat for sure. I think that they live in the toughest places anything can live. They are magnificent. They're authentically American, North American, I should say. But other than getting in tremendous shape and planning to spend a lot of time behind glass, but you're going to Alaska. So, I mean, you're going to Kodiak. So, I mean, there's a lot more goats on Kodiak Island than the place where I hunted in Southwest Montana. So I think that'll be easier, but I mean, you're still going to be spending a lot of time behind glass. And besides getting in shape, enjoy it. I mean, you're hunting a unique place for a very unique critter. They present. I mean, there were so many times during my hunt where I could have gotten relatively close to a billy, but I mean, they're on a sheer face, and if I were to kill that billy, I wasn't going to recover him. So, I mean, that's a unique challenge. I had to pass up stalks just because of the country they live in, and it's just, I think, just enjoy it. Not everybody gets to hunt goats in their lifetime, and that's how I approach my hunt. I was lucky enough to draw my tag with very few preference points. And, before my dad passed, we talked about, I mean, that's one of the hunts we talked about a lot. And we talked about like, oh, make sure, he's just like, just make sure you enjoy it, and you do everything you can, from scouting to preparation to actually just being in that moment, on a knob, on a ridge, away from everything to just enjoy the fact that you're hunting goats. So that's the advice I give, and I'm super excited for you, man. That's going to be good. Are you going to hunt with your bow, or are you going to take a rifle? How are you planning on hunting?
I'm going to be using the Sig Sauer cross rifle, and I'll be using a pistol that's not quite out yet, still actually in development as we
Really
speak.
super cool.
Because there are some bears there that are bigger than my future, and I've got to I've got to tromp through quite a bit of alders and willows before I can get into goat country. And I'm told that there are these big like tunnels through that thick brush that are the bear tunnels, and that it's very tempting to walk through those, but you don't know if you're going against the flow of traffic, if you will, if you get in those tunnels.
Volkswagen bus is in there waiting for you, right?
Yeah, with or without a sense of humor.
Oh man, I mean, bears. I mean, talk about an animal that's pretty much recovered, in my opinion. I mean, geez, it seems like when we were in college 13 years ago, or however long it's been, there were you didn't really hardly hear of any grizzlies, but now they're not only in Alaska anymore or in Yellowstone. They're just practically everywhere. So
Yeah, no, I mean, I saw pictures of bears, of grizzly bears in Oregon this year. I just posted a picture of a grizzly bear in Northern California that was in July of this year. Yeah, and actually, that California bear, it looks like the bear on the California flag, which is
no longer
hilarious.
just a flag. Oh man, but I mean, back to goats. I mean, I'm so stoked for you, man. I mean, that was a lifetime hunt with me, and if I never get a chance to hunt goats again, it's something I'll always remember. And and hunt it how you want to hunt it. That's the other advice I would give you. I mean, make sure you kind of dictate how that opportunity plays out, and stick to your guns on that. And I mean, that's what I did. And I mean, I've got a great story to go along with the billy I was able to harvest. And yeah, I mean, it's something I'll always remember as well. So super stoked that you get to hunt goats. We saw when we fished with you several years ago, we saw tons of goats on the Grand Ronde. It was right after I hunted them, and that's just that's a pretty cool place to see goats too. But yes, when do you go down there, in September?
Yeah, September 27th. So I'll leave here and go guide 3 weeks of archery, and I'll go straight from archery camp to Kodiak. So I'm incredibly excited about it. I've read every book that I can get my hands on. I'm blown up biologists, and they're probably getting tired of me talking to them at this point. But yeah, I'm really excited, and yeah, grateful for that advice. And I feel like that's classic Adam Hutchison advice that you could apply to, any of these endeavors, right? Like,
Yep.
and I tell clients this all the time, or people that I'm helping fly fish, like all of these skills that you're trying to develop, the end state of them is to be able to enjoy fly fishing. So you only need to get quote unquote good enough at fly fishing to get to the point where you're having a good time and enjoying it. And that's going to be different for different people. So, just get to that point and ride it out as long as you can. And then when you're no longer enjoying it at the skill level that you have, you need to acquire some new skills. So just enjoy it. Have fun. That's what we're out here for.
That's exactly right, man. That's exactly right. And look for a billy with a horse head too. That was like, they're like, look for the horse head. And I'm sure you've heard that before, but when you see a goat with a horse head, I mean, let's face it, like a Boone and Crockett billy, if we're comparing like goats to elk, or big muleys, they're a little bit tougher to judge, man. That's Even nannies I've seen, in my hunt, I saw some really big nannies. And my goal was like, hey, I want to shoot a billy, for a couple of different reasons. In Montana, when you draw a Montana tag in most units, you can shoot uh, a billy or a nanny without kids. And my goal, whether it was with a bow or a rifle, was to get a mature billy, because I mean, you take out even I don't have a problem with someone shooting a kidless nanny at all, but I just think it helps out that population, and goats kind of struggled a little bit, but look for that horse head. I mean, the billy I ended up taking, I spotted him from like 3 miles away as a white speck on a south facing hill. And even through my spotting, I mean, at that distance, I could tell this sucker had a horse head. And that's really what, and then the next weekend I went in there 10 miles to find this thing. He hadn't moved 15 yards, and he ended up being about a 13-year-old billy. So he was pretty tremendous. But yeah, look for that horse head, and that kind of, as far as age is concerned, that really identifies bigger billies from smaller ones, is what I found. So,
Okay. Well, I'm going to do my best to make you proud, sir. And Adam, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to sit down and talk with me today. It's been too long, and I look forward to getting out in the woods or on a creek with you here as soon as possible.
yeah, let's scratch out some time. We're all busier than we ever have, but that's important. So yeah, we'll figure it
Yeah.
out. Like maybe another Grand Ron trip, huh? So
Yeah. Sounds good. If we get any steelhead to come back ever again, we should go try and catch at least one of them.
sounds like a plan.
All right, brother. Well, thank you again. And if people want to find out more about you or about Winston Fly Rods, where do they go?
www.winstonrods.com for our website. Instagram is at Winston Rod, or at Winston Rods, at Winston Rods for Facebook as well. But yep, the website has all of our product information and everything else. Some really great films to kind of keep people entertained. If they have to stay home, we invest a lot of money in the films, and obviously our rods. So yeah, that's where they can find me. I'm on Instagram at a Hutchison1032. So that's where I spend most of my social media time is on Instagram. So
And if you're ever driving through Twin Bridges, Montana, stop into Winston. They have a beautiful showroom with all kinds of fly rods out there. They've got a casting course right out front. You can go cast rods in the wind, more than likely, until your heart is content.
yeah, generally. Right now with the pandemic going on, since we've had to reduce our production staff and our front office staff, we've closed the showroom down this summer and closed tours. But 2021 we're hopeful we'll be back up and running. But we can certainly help people out through this summer. I mean, you can still cast rods. We can pull any rod in our showroom, and you can certainly cast them on the casting field and buy accessories through the window as well. So yeah, I mean, we're here, so stop on by for sure. So, but
Awesome,
hopefully
man.
2021 is a different year than 2020.
That's everybody's hope. Okay. Well, thank you, sir. And we'll catch you next time.
Thank you, sir. It's great catching up.
Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed the show. This episode was edited by Emily Brannigan, with original music written and performed by Justin Hay. Artwork for the Six Ranch podcast was created by John Chatelain and digitized by Celia Christofferson. If you enjoyed the show, I encourage you to share it with a friend and subscribe. You can find photos and more content on Instagram at Six Ranch Podcast. I'll catch you next week.